All right, it is 8 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get things started, shall we? Hello, good morning. Let me adjust my camera here, it seems a little off. There we go. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have a very special reading tonight. We are reading a new book written by author C.A. House, Archblade, Legend of the Defiler. This is, as I understand it, a self-published work. So the author has worked very hard on this, and they're kind of in the trenches on trying to get the word out. And we are more than happy to partake, read an excellent book together, and help out a smaller author as they're getting ready to get going, get their name out there. So very happy to be part of this, and was very happy to hear from the author. Um, I really had no anticipation that we'd be reading anything that was written in the last 100 years or so for a good while. We've been on the public domain for a while. So being able to read something that's current and contemporary and written by just a normal person, it's great. It's really exciting. So we'll see how we get through it. We'll have a good chunk. We'll enjoy it tonight together. I've been very careful not to spoil myself on this. I picked up my copy when we decided to do this reading, and I've pretty much just seen the title, looked at the cover. I want to experience this first together with everyone here tonight. So I'm going into this eyes wide closed, and we'll see together what we have in store for us tonight. We do have the author in here with us tonight, so they'll be able to provide their thoughts and commentary in the chat. If anyone listening along has any questions or comments of their own, please feel free to chime in. I'm sure they are more than happy to interact with folks around here. And if not, just sit back and enjoy the show together. So without too much more preamble, let's go ahead and just jump right into things, shall we? There is a bit of a forward slash pre-content section, so we'll start right off there, and then we'll roll right into the rest of the book. Everything began on the 191st day of a 400-day mission. The Soledad government lost contact with exploration vessel 203 SF Forerunner. A complement of 1 captain, 4 officers, and 4 crew members suddenly vanished. It caused a quiet uproar among scientists, as it had been outfitted with the newest Nova Drive technology and would be nearly impossible to replace. Their mission had been simple: seek out life-supporting Haven-class planets, establish diplomatic relations with sentient species, and acquire any new technology that could be used in the Soledad system conflict. Their ship status had been optimal, their crew status uncompromised. All Soledad could do was wait to see if their people would be heard from again. Chapter 1. We had no idea what to expect, but we continued ever forward. Sir, I think we might have found something, Angel stated, her voice barely audible from her station on the second floor of the drive room. What? A head popped up as an older male climbed the ladder leading up to her. You found what? I think I picked up a Haven-class planet nearby using our sensors, but I'm trying to verify. She brushed a few strands of her hair from her lapis blue eyes as she reanalyzed the data. The older male shook his head. How many times do I have to say it? Just call me Dravik. We've been out for months now, and we're going to be on this mission for many more. Dravik Jakren sighed. Although he was muscular from years of working with machinery, he often complained of aching joints, showing his age of 63 years. Sorry, sir. Dravik, sir. It's just hard, she mumbled while her gaze never left the screen. Suddenly, she pointed out a small blip and declared triumphantly, Here! He bent down and narrowed his eyes. That's nearly 25 light years off course. He then looked at her in confusion. How are you able to scan something that far away? Remember my idea to enhance the sensors I told you about? She asked, but was met with a blank stare. I boosted them through the energy frequencies from the engine, and then used data rerouted from... Right, I get it, Dravik interrupted with a raised hand. I remember giving permission to try it, but I couldn't recall how it worked because it sounded convoluted. He was visibly embarrassed. I honestly didn't expect anything to come of it. I'm sorry for doubting you. Angel turned her head back to the console screen. She was frustrated that her theory had been dismissed to begin with, but she was pleased that it was a success. The captain will want to hear about this, so you better get to it, Dravik declared with a firm pat on her back. What? Why me? You're in charge of the drive room. I'm just a crew one, she stammered as she rapidly copied the information to a spare datapad. She attempted to give it to him, but Dravik refused and instead defiantly folded his arms. It was your idea, your enhancements, and your discovery. You should get credit. So, get over there, and that's an order. The word order had an authoritative edge that caused Angel to stand up straighter. She turned on her heel, swiftly descended the ladder, and headed towards the bridge. Absently, she trailed her fingertips along the gray plasteel wall to ground herself. Occasionally, they would catch onto the seams of an access panel reserved only for engineering personnel to use, but soon they would resume their smooth glide. There were no windows there with their beautiful sights to distract herself from her racing heart. Those were reserved for the bridge, crew quarters, and a nice panel of them framed the mess hall as well. She broke contact with the wall briefly, but when she came back there was a stinging pop on her middle finger. She winced and sighed through her nose. Static was courtesy of the plush red carpet that went throughout most of the ship. The captain had insisted on having homey touches, and had installed it when the ship was first fitted for missions. Practicality be damned. The focusing exercise wasn't helping as her mind rapidly bounced back and forth between what to say to the captain and further improvements to the sensor system she could make. As she opened the door to the bridge, she was accosted by the sounds of laughter and arguments. Akron Rothed, the captain of the Forerunner, read over a datapad in his hand. A tall, red-headed male stood at his elbow, with green eyes that glittered from humor. See, Reynard agrees with me. Akron chuckled with a tilt of his chin to the male beside him. A captain always has the privilege of first contact, along with any perks that come along with it. Akron handed the pad back to Reynard, who went to take his place at the station. As he passed by Angel, he flashed her a friendly smile. Her cheeks flushed, and she averted her eyes. His steps did not falter as he resumed his position at the weapons station. As the strategist and head of security, he was responsible for the primary defenses of the ship and its crew. Reynard Aldrin had joined up with the Forerunner immediately after he was honorably discharged from the military. His defining characteristic was an intense restlessness that was evidenced by his constant presence on the bridge, and his early morning calisthenics class that Angel conveniently slept through most days. And I say, that's a disgusting rule made up so that captains can bork any hot aliens they find, and have an excuse for it, the pilot called out. She punched a few commands into her console and read over the information that scrolled across the screen, content with what she saw. She readjusted the trajectory of the ship and settled back in her seat. Her name was Lauren Aldrin, and she was Reynard's cousin. She had the same vibrant red hair and green eyes. However, where he was taller, she stood barely over 1.5 meters. Despite her stature, she was one of the most powerful women Angel had ever met, and the young woman admired her greatly. Lauren had been the helm officer of the Forerunner for 5 years, possessing a unique mind for fast decisions and a complete unwillingness to give up, which was currently on display. That is a mere coincidence. Just because some captains have abused that privilege, it doesn't mean we're all on a secret quest for sex. It's a minor and inescapable possibility in our occupation, Akron snickered, unable to maintain a solemn face. Surely your wife had similar things to say about it before we left on our mission. Of course, she doesn't care who I have fun with on the trip, so long as she never has to meet them, Lauren replied easily, as though it were a normal condition for anyone to have. Then, with a wicked grin on her face, she swiveled around to face the captain and asked, "Shall I ask our doctor about her opinion on the matter?" Akron held up his hands in surrender. "Maya and I have a very sensible arrangement. I can be as friendly as necessary to alien cultures, and if I ever do anything inappropriate, I get ejected into space. See? Simple." As he turned to his left to address Reynard again, he saw Angel standing just at his shoulder. He jerked in surprise at her sudden presence and ability to move so silently. Recovering from his shock, Akron raised an eyebrow. "Angel, how long have you been there?" "Not long, sir. I just have something for you," she reported, rushing forward to push the pad into his hands. He gave it a cursory glance, but when he read the data, his eyes widened and reread it a second and third time. Furrowing his brow, he turned to her. "Is this confirmed? Are you sure?" Angel nodded, beaming with pride for her accomplishment. "I increased the accuracy of our sensors by roughly 20% and our range by 50%, so I am certain of it." The captain held the pad in both hands, examining it carefully. 20-hour day and night cycle, 1.2-year rotation of a blue star, mild climate. This planet is a lot like Soledad. This is the first real lead we've had on this mission. Maybe it won't be a wasted trip after all, he declared happily, and tossed the pad to Lauren, who effortlessly caught it with a single hand. "Engage the Nova Drive and get us there as soon as possible. I want us exploring the planet, shaking hands with any potential residents, and possibly restocking supplies within a few days," Akron ordered. Lauren shot a thumbs up and went to her work on her console. Reynard pulled up the external sensors and began to scan for anomalies on their new course with the new enhancements. With everyone focused on their tasks, Angel tried to leave as quietly as possible, her sociability already exhausted for the day. "Well done, Kruon," Akron praised her when she was barely a meter from the door, causing her to freeze in her tracks. "Tell Dravik that we will be running the engine hot for the next couple of days, and to keep his complaining to a minimum until we get to this planet of yours. Maybe we can all celebrate in the mess hall later." Lauren and Reynard also voiced their encouragement for Angel to celebrate with the crew, but she stammered, "No, that's okay. I have other things I need to take care of," as she darted out the door. Akron sighed loudly and ran his hands through his salt and pepper hair. "She still acts like it's her first day on the ship. I've tried asking her to share a meal or to include her in conversation, but she always makes excuses," Lauren said as she entered the final command. The ship hummed loudly as it accelerated past light speeds before falling silent again with their course laid in. "I know. When I brought her on, I thought she would be an incredible asset to the crew," Akron admitted as he turned from the door where Angel had left. "She was on top of her class and excelled in nearly every aspect of training. Too bad we can't seem to get her out of her shell." "Can't win over everyone, Captain. You might just have to accept the occasional brilliant idea she gives us and leave her be," Reynard chimed in. His voice was laced with resignation. Akron groaned and stood from his chair. Several joints popped loudly as he stretched. At almost 50, he had been a captain for over half his life. His promising career as a soldier had been cut short by a laser blast from an outlaw. Fortunately, he had as much brain as brawn and found himself promoted to the exploration field after he recovered. Resisting the urge to sit back down and give in to his aging body, Akron slowly approached the view screen and carefully watched for any signs of trouble. The days passed by without incident. On the night before they were to make landfall on the planet, Angel sat brushing her long hair in her quarters. An empty food tray sat perched on her vanity next to a small stack of books she was reading. The crew was having a party in the mess hall with plenty of food, music, and noise, but as usual, she chose to dine in peace in her room. Growing up, she had often been called an introvert or a wallflower, but those names had never bothered her. Today, though, she felt a twinge in her brain and frowned to herself in the mirror. A thought crossed her mind, a sudden doubt that she was missing something. However, like always, she shook her head and dismissed the notion. She had carefully crafted her comfort zone, and would always be content with that. She changed into a simple nightgown and began to tidy her room before bed. She carefully gathered all her errant books. Books were antiquated, and almost everyone used datapads, but she had amassed a small collection. She couldn't explain it, but the tactile pleasure of turning a page was better than a screen. There was a large shelf against the wall farthest from her bed that she could only fit half of her collection on anymore. The other half of the shelves were taken up by plants. The crew and botanist insisted that each crew member have foliage to break up the sterile monotony of their metal room. However, Angel knew it was a pretense, and that they were hoarding various plants around the ship after Akron ordered that any room left in the botany lab be left for samples from other worlds. Angel reached out and gently touched the rich green leaves of a flower that had yet to bloom. Slivers of dark red peeked out from the green head, and she wondered what it would be like when it was fully opened. Unable to stifle a large yawn, she slipped between the soft gray sheets of her bed and immediately fell into a dreamless sleep. Hours later, she awoke with a start at the feeling of the entire ship shaking. She briefly wondered what was happening before her training took over, and she leapt into action. Barely maintaining her balance, she dressed in her uniform. A rumble sounded, and she had to dodge away from her bookcase as a thick tome crashed to the ground, followed by 3 plants. Her mind raced, trying to think of all the possibilities of what was happening. "Battle stations!" Lauren's voice rang out as the lights in the ship turned bright red. Angel's heart froze, panicking at the idea that she had led everyone to their deaths. She broke into a run, nearly tripping as she rushed to the bridge. Although her usual role was assisting in the drive room, during emergencies, she was to use the station across from Reynard to conduct sensor sweeps, assess power needs, and facilitate communications throughout the ship. As soon as she entered the bridge, she flew to her console. Lauren was viciously attempting to control the ship. Akron arrived shortly after, pulling his uniform jacket on hurriedly and ignoring his wildly disheveled hair. "Report!" he barked. "I have no idea, Captain," Lauren yelled, her voice filled with anger. "We were just sitting here, scanning the planet, when, with no warning, we started getting pulled into the atmosphere. If I didn't know any better, I'd swear we were in a tractor beam of some sort, but I can't find the source of what's pulling us." Lauren roared in frustration as the ship violently shuddered, and she braced herself against her chair. Angel clutched the sides of her console to keep from falling, and immediately started to implement the improved sensors. Calibration only took a moment before data began to rapidly scroll across her screen, and she called out, "It's a gravitational field, and it's far more powerful than anything I've ever seen. It's almost as if there's a singularity down there trying to crush us." "Everyone hold on," Akron called over the speakers as they watched the planet rush towards them on the view screen. The ship lurched violently from the turbulence, throwing everyone from their positions. Simultaneous panic shouts filled the bridge as the ship plummeted to the planet below. That brings us to the end of Chapter 1. Oh, and I think my page turn things on the fritz there. One sec. There we go. So we've got some excitement already. We've seen introductions to a few of the characters. We've got the wallflower engineering assistant, our second, that upgraded the sensors. We've got the gruff older engineer down the engine room. We've seen the captain and the security officer and the pilot. We've had allusions to several of the other crew. I'm sure we'll meet them as we go further on. But it's so far so good. We've got an interesting beginning. It kind of grips you and pulls you in. And right at the end of the first chapter, we've reached our first little cliffhanger already. So let's just go ahead and continue on while we've got that little spice and see what we have in store for us with Chapter 2. We were unsure of what would come next. The only certainty was that danger could be anywhere. Despite the speed and force of the ship entering the atmosphere, it was eerily calm after they leveled off and the bridge crew climbed back into their seats. "Damage report," Akron demanded as he rubbed his shoulder. Surprisingly minimal, sir, Reynard answered. There is some hull damage from the rough entry into the atmosphere, but nothing serious. Everything else is fully operational, with some damaged conduits on the top level. That's a relief, at least. Akron took a deep, calming breath. Lauren, what's the status of the flight systems? We've stabilized, Lauren reported, but I'm still getting resistance when I try to go back. She trailed off while she glared at her console as though it had personally betrayed her. This is incredible. The field appears to get stronger the more we push against it. It pulled us in, and is preventing us from leaving. Angel stared as she read from the sensor readings. Almost sounds like a trap of some sort, Akron muttered, and scratched his bearded chin, contemplating the possibilities. Lauren, I want you to start going over the planet. You said this place was huge. Maybe we're missing a way out somehow. Angel, you use those fancy sensors of yours to scan for life. See if we can find anyone to help us, or try to get a message out to home. He examined his console, and a chime rang out, indicating he was receiving a call from another part of the ship. Maya, he beamed as a woman's face appeared on the monitor. She had silver eyes and thick black hair with streaks of gray that were braided over her shoulder. She smiled back, both visibly relieved that the other was okay. Any injuries? The woman nodded inside. Dravik came in with a concussion, and Tarn received some minor burns from power conduit overloading, but nothing significant. I'll send someone to the drive room. Let me know if anything else comes up, Akron stated before ending the call. He heard the bridge exit opening, and knew Reynard was already on his way. With the knowledge that his crew was safe, Akron turned to the view screen and the alien world below them. I think the gravity field was blocking our sensors because I can't get a message through, and I am reading a lot here that I didn't see before, Angel reported, narrowing her eyes at the screen before her. I'm seeing different variations in flora and fauna with bipedal species. This world is abundant in life. A flash of color stole her attention, and she turned to the view screen to stare at the beautiful world just outside their ship. Lauren stood from her seat, kneading her neck from being thrown from her chair. With only being able to use thrusters, it's going to take us weeks to go over this whole planet, she said bitterly. Akron knew fully well she blamed herself for their predicament, and gave her a reassuring smile. Yes, but thankfully, we have a lot here to keep us occupied until we find a way out. Let's find a place to set down so we can make repairs and get our bearings. With any luck, someone will— Sir, we're receiving communication, Angel interrupted. What? From where? Akron whipped around, excitement in his voice. Somewhere on the surface, she replied. There! The view screen adjusted to show an open field stretched out before them. The sparse yellow grass fluttered from the breeze of their ship's exhaust. To the west was a line of trees leading into a dense forest. Racing across the field towards them was a sleek black vehicle. It was a fraction of the size of the Forerunner, but was moving at an impressive speed along the ground. Put them on then, Akron ordered. The screen shifted to show the handsome face of a young man. His pale skin was flawless, and a short crop of golden hair framed his face, which was smiling warmly at the crew. Greetings! I see you have fallen victim to our little anomaly outside the planet. He tilted his head and swept the hair from his eyes. His soft voice sounded concerned, but his brow furrowed slightly. Looks like it, Akron agreed as he approached the screen. My name is Akron, captain of the Forerunner, hailing from the Soledad system. Soledad? That must be very far away. We've never been able to leave our world, so having visitors from other planets is always a big occasion for us. The man gave a grand wave and a half bow from his seat. My name is Idura, ranking member of the Conclave, and I welcome you all to our world, Durance. Durance? Durance? We'll see. My thanks for the welcome. You say you have had visitors from other worlds, Akron asked, his voice hopeful. Yes, but unfortunately they have all been destroyed, and their technology was harvested before we could help them. He shook his head in frustration. It is a serious problem on our world, but if you follow me, I can bring you to my home, where you will be safe. His face broke into a wide grin, revealing a row of perfectly white teeth. Angel felt a shiver run up her spine, and took an unconscious step back. Something was off about this man. Akron nodded. We just need to temporarily land for some repairs, and afterward we would be happy to come with you. Before the monitor switched off, Angel almost thought she saw Idura's lips twitch into a more frightful smirk, but the screen returned to a view of the grass field before she could process what she had seen. Are we really going to go with him, Captain? Lauren asked skeptically. It creeps me out, Angel admitted, with her eyes still fixed on the monitor. Akron had examined her, somewhat surprised at her admission. He comes off a bit odd to me as well. However, we have no idea what to expect here, and no way to leave, so we're going to try to get some answers while we go along with him, at least for now. Lauren shrugged and turned to her station, knowing the captain made his final decision. Angel stood silently for a few more seconds before returning to her work as well. Occasionally, her attention turned to the monitor. She wondered about their supposed new friend and what his intentions were. After going over the transmission log, her eyes widened. Then she double and triple checked her findings. "Captain," she gasped, "the translator filter wasn't activated for the transmission." Akron came to her station in 3 great strides to see the results himself. "I'll be damned," he whispered. "He spoke our language." He stared at the screen as his thoughts turned back to the person they had just met and the implications of this new information. How? This planet is hundreds of light years from ours. The odds of both worlds developing the same language, Angel trailed off, are impossible, I know, Akron finished for her. We'll add that to the pile of mysteries we need to figure out. And while I agree that it's an important one, solving how to leave is our priority. Within the hour, the Forerunner had landed on the planet's surface, and 3 members of the crew were outside meeting their new acquaintance. Walking for the first time on the alien world, dry ground crunched under their boots, and they kicked up small clouds of dust. Angel watched as small furry creatures darted between the blades of grass. She carefully scanned each unique plant and creature she could find with her datapad as she listened intently to the conversation between Akron and Adura. Adura brushed dirt from along the long gold robe he wore. "Those devices seem sophisticated, Captain. What are they, if you don't mind my asking?" He pointed to the pad hanging from Akron's belt. Akron leaned down and pulled it out to show him. "They're datapads. It has an interactive screen that can be used for one-on-one communication, information storage, scanning, and emergency location," he explained, showing off the more superficial features. Adura's expression was guarded, but his eyes roved over the device. "We have the ability to send messages, but this is far more advanced," Adura complimented. "Might anything be available for trade?" Akron returned the pad to his belt. "I think it's best if we talk to your leaders and figure some things out before we discuss exchanging technology. No offense." Adura was obviously disappointed, but nodded in understanding. "Of course, you're right." "What can you tell us about this conclave you are from?" Akron asked. "We're a large group of like-minded individuals dedicated to keeping peace on our world, and we're always happy to meet new visitors if possible." Without further clarification, he continued to ask questions about the Forerunner and the technology they used. Angel noted that Adura was talented in steering the topic away from himself and continually bringing it back to the Forerunner or their technology. A soft beep from her pad caught her attention, and she looked down and blinked in confusion as she saw a message, but it did not say from whom. Casually peeking over to the captain, Angel saw that his own pad had picked it up as well. Adura was still engrossed in his pseudo-interrogation of Akron, and she kept track of him from the corner of her eye. Satisfied no one was paying attention to her, she pretended to begin a new file about a small reptilian creature as she opened the message. "Don't trust Adura, and don't let him set foot on your vessel." Her heart began to speed up, and subtle movement caught her attention as Akron examined the message, and the stranger broke away to inspect the hull of the Forerunner. As though nothing was amiss, he placed his pad back into its holster and cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. "All right, we're ready to go back in. Tomorrow we will follow our new friend to his home," he declared with a pointed look at Adura. "Happy to help, Captain," Adura responded, breaking away from his examination. They shook hands, and with another perfect smile, Adura returned to his vehicle. Angel waved over to the 3rd crew member, ensuring he had heard the order. He gave a slight nod and motioned for her to walk ahead of him. She fell in step with Akron, bringing up the rear. The 3 boarded the ship, and before anyone else could speak, Akron shut the hatch door and locked it into place. "I have a feeling you both saw the message," he asked quietly, as though Adura might be able to hear him. "Yes, sir," Tarn replied. Tarn Arves was the ship's cook, and second only to Reynard for security duties. His long brown mustache was waxed into perfect curls at the ends, and his ramrod posture held him to an imposing figure. His beefy arms were folded behind him, and his barrel chest was puffed up at attention. He was a man of few words, but his presence was unmistakable. His somber brown eyes betrayed no emotion as he regarded Akron for guidance. Before Angel could reply, Lauren came into the hall, holding up her datapad. "Captain, what the hell is this?" the pilot demanded with a scowl. "Something we will all discuss," he answered as he typed a command into his pad. "I want everyone in the mess hall so we can talk about recent events." Without waiting for a response, he walked down the hall with the others in hot pursuit. It was uncommon for the entire crew to be summoned to one place, but the events of the previous 24 hours made it a necessity. Angel watched Lauren, who paced impatiently by the main door. Tarn prepared vegetables for the hydroponics bay for their dinner behind the wide counter, while Angel quietly envied his ability to focus on other tasks with everything going on. Reynard, Bastien, and Lily sat together as usual. Usually, the three crewmen would invite her to their table, but this time an air of uneasiness filled the space around them, and they sat in silence. Even Reynard, who is usually the most boisterous of the three, was subdued. Dravik, Akron, and Maya stood near the back of the room and quietly spoke together. As the most senior members of the crew, they wanted to discuss the situation before opening the conversation to everyone. After a brief recap of the events, Akron motioned for the crew to take their seats. "All right, so we are up to speed on what happened and the message we all received," he called out. "But what does it mean?" Maya asked from her place at his side. "The message implies that Adura will do something dangerous if he comes aboard." Angel could hear the slight panic in her voice. Maya Rothad, was responsible for the well-being of the entire crew, so Angel understood why she would bring the point up first. "So let him. If he tries anything, I'll blast a hole through him," Dravik said with a hearty cackle. Akron shot him a wry smile. "I know, old man. We all would jump at the chance to defend the ship." He sighed and focused on everyone gathered. "The real question is, who sent the message?" "Adura gave me a quick inspection of the ship. It's a simple enough design, and no one else was there. So it had to come from somewhere else out there." He gestured vaguely to the alien world around them. "Someone who thinks he is a threat. Maybe a hostile force of some kind," Reynard offered. "I'm more interested in why they speak our language. It appears as though the people of this world are the same race as us. There must be some historical connection between Soledad and Durance. If that's the case, we could find part of our ancient history on this planet." Bastien nearly shouted from excitement. As the ship's historian and anthropologist, he was nearly delirious at the idea of a foreign world connected to theirs. Everyone in the room started murmuring amongst themselves about theories of the mysterious message and the chance of it being a hoax. Akron raised a hand, causing a hush to fall over the group. "For the time being, we will continue as if nothing happened. We will still follow him and keep a close eye on his behavior. I was considering giving him a tour, but I think we can put that off, at least for now." Akron purposefully made eye contact with each person at least once as he spoke. "If he tries anything, we can defend ourselves, or just run. Our ship can fly, and his can't, which gives us a serious advantage. So we move on. We all need a good night's rest, so I want night shift on duty and to report anything suspicious. Understood?" The crew all nodded in understanding, and without another word, dispersed. Angel headed to her own quarters. She was still nervous about the situation, and needed something to distract herself. When she arrived, she sat at her small desk and opened the top book of an impressive stack at her elbow. She flipped to where she had left off, and soon got lost in the words. As she read, she reached under her bed and pulled out a small bag of candies. She popped a sweet yet tart sphere into her mouth, and settled into her quiet routine of reading and taking notes for her research. That brings us to the end of Chapter 2. So we've met one of the locals, and it definitely appears as if not everything is as it seems. There's the mysterious third party who sent them a message. There's the mystery of how they're speaking their language without needing to be translated through their filters, and just the oh so convenient way that no one ever leaves. They get visitors, but no one can ever get out. So we've already got mysteries up to our ears. And thank you for the guidance on the pronunciations. Names are sometimes a little challenging, but they take off pretty well. At least it's not French. Regular viewers will know I'm atrocious at pronouncing French. So we'll see if it gets to that point. So let's carry on with Chapter 3. We'll just keep this ball rolling. New ideas are often frightening. All the more reason that they need to be heard. Do we really have to follow him? We're going at a fraction of our normal speed here, Lauren grumbled. Yes, he was cryptic about where this conclave is, and I'm not comfortable putting our back to him anyway, Akron replied. Angel folded his arms and reviewed the sensor readings for what felt like the 20th time. She felt a pang of irritation that they were following this strange man at all. In her mind, they ought to head in the opposite direction and leave him far behind. Akron turned to her. For a brief moment, Angel wondered if he had somehow heard her thoughts. "Any luck getting new information on your sensors, crewwoman?" he asked. "Nothing. I can't determine weapons or even a power source. There's been some odd biological material showing up, but they could easily be runoff from the environment," she replied with a shrug. "Well, keep at it. I want any extra data we can get on him or his vessel." Akron ordered as he returned his attention to the view screen. Angel gazed back to the readout, going over it for the 21st time. The door to the bridge opened, and Tarn walked in, carrying food for the bridge crew. He set the trays down beside each other before finally staring at the view screen. "Anything new?" he rumbled. "It's a perfectly boring escort, with nothing nefarious, suspicious, or questionable as far as I can tell," Akron groaned, as he rested his head against the palm of his hand. He felt conflicted, as though he was bothered that his instincts may have missed the mark. Tarn nodded silently, and then turned to leave them to their work. "Maybe I should see if he needs any help in the storeroom," Reynard mused as he watched the older male leave. "If this stranger was going to attack us, I think we would have done so by now." "Tarn is fine, but if you need to stretch your legs, I think Dravik could use a hand in the drive room," Akron offered as he picked up his fork. Reynard gave a salute and dashed out of the bridge, holding his plate in one hand as he devoured his food with the other. "He's just as tense as the rest of us, if not more so," Lauren remarked. Akron chuckled a bit as he picked through his salad. He did not care as much for vegetables, but his wife insisted that he vary his diet now and then. He's young, and this is his first off-world mission. Despite our setbacks, this will be a great experience for all of us if we can manage to get back home. He bent forward to take a bite, but was interrupted by a sudden loud noise from the view screen, followed by smoke billowing from Adura's vehicle. "Well, it's not boring anymore," Lauren crowed, a bit too happily. Akron let out a small snort and stood. "Let's at least pretend to be serious about this while he can see us. Open a transmission to him." Adura's face appeared on the screen. His usual smiling countenance was marred with distress as he pressed buttons without response. "You appear to be in trouble, friend," Akron remarked. Angel could swear she heard a dubious edge to his voice. "Very observant, friend," Adura responded with exasperation. He sighed and stood to face them directly through the monitor. "I don't suppose I could come aboard, and you could use some of your fancy technology to help with repairs? I swear, I'll leave it all to you, and not watch." He smiled again, causing another shiver to go down Angel's spine. She shot a look towards Akron and came dangerously close to speaking out of turn. Fortunately, Akron held his hands up in a helpless gesture. "I'm afraid not," he replied with as neutral a tone as he could muster. "Naturally, we are willing to stop and help you with any necessary repairs, but I don't think we're ready to have you come aboard yet." Adura stared at them intently through the view screen. At first, Angel wondered if there was a malfunction, and he hadn't heard them, but then his expression changed. His lips parted slightly, exposing his teeth. His nostrils flared, and his eyes narrowed. While being somewhat unsettling before, the man downright terrified her now. "Have it your way," he snarled, and ended the transmission. "Captain, I think Lauren began before Akron's booming voice cut her off. "Should we get the hell out of here?" "I couldn't agree more," he finished for her. "Lock weapons on him and start setting a course." He was interrupted by a sudden jolt of the ship. "Bastard fired on us!" Lauren shouted, her hands flying to the secondary weapons control on her station. When the console didn't respond to her commands, she growled and struck it with her fist. "And he knew exactly where to hit us. Our weapons were damaged, and the sensors are down." "Get us out of here, then," Akron bellowed. The ship rocked once more, and an alarm went off, indicating damage in the drive room. The room became thick with panic when Angel realized Adura had the upper hand now. "Dravik, what's going on down there?" Akron called into his console. "Something pierced the hull and is eating away at it. The Nova drive is offline. Reynard got hit in the chest, and he's unconscious. I'm having Lily drag him to medical while I try to fix this," he reported, his voice ringing loudly over the shrill alarms. A bright yellow light blinked from the communications panel on Angel's right. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," she called out over her shoulder as she dashed towards it. "Save it. I don't want to see him gloat about how he tricked us," Akron growled, pulling up the ship's status on his console. "No, it's from somewhere else. Another vessel. It's approaching from the port side," she exclaimed. "Show me," Akron ordered. The view screen flickered and showed the vehicle on approach. It was much wider than Adora's, and a deep blue rather than black. It also hovered half a meter off the ground rather than traveling on wheels. Akron pressed a button to receive the transmission. A face appeared on the screen, a man with pale skin, black hair, vibrant crimson eyes, and a determined expression fixed on them. "This is Lark, of the Sociarian Archblades. Are you currently under attack from Conclave forces?" His voice sounded stilted, as though he were reading from a script. Akron and Lauren looked at each other in confusion. "Yes, isn't that obvious?" Akron responded. The man nodded seriously. "Now that we have that out of the way, you've been hit by a plague bomb. Do you have anyone on board that can use essence magic?" His question was met with more confusion and silence. "I'll take that as a no. In that case, I need to come on board immediately to help cure the infection." Akron stood and pointed an angry finger as he glowered at the view screen. "Now wait just a damn second. I'm getting sick of people here telling me they need to come on my ship." Another jolt almost knocked the bridge crew off their feet, and the overhead lights flickered, silencing further protests. "I understand your reluctance, but maybe this will help convince you." He leaned over and pressed a series of buttons. Through the view screen, they saw a targeting scanner in his ship, firing blasts of brilliant energy at Adora's vessel. It melted the hull where it struck, and more smoke poured from the openings. A moment later, they saw him bring up Adora's snarling face on a transmission in his vessel. "You can run home with your tail between your legs now. Be sure to tell Darkos how you failed, Adora." He mocked with a wolfish grin. "Defiler, you're lucky I had to damage my ship to fool these simpletons. Otherwise, I would destroy you myself," Adora hissed. "We both know you're no match for me, so stop blustering and leave these people alone," Lark replied before he cut the transmission without further exchange. Angel turned to Akron and nodded, confirming that the enemy ship was indeed retreating. "We appreciate your help, but I still can't just let you come on my ship," Akron said, while maintaining a calm composure as he continued to assess the damage to the Forerunner. "Again, I understand your position, but this isn't about what you or I want. Your ship is being eaten away by Conclave biomagic, and if any of your crew members were hit, they need to be treated as well. Otherwise, they will rapidly die and become withered monsters that will come after the rest of you." The man's words burned with desperation. Akron's eyes were fixed on the screen as he tried to read the man's intentions. Finally, he opened a transmission. "Maya," he called, "what is Reynard's condition?" "I don't know," she replied frantically. "He isn't responding to regeneration, antibiotic treatments, or anything. His wound is already becoming necrotic, and I don't understand why." Akron's shoulders slumped with the weight of his position. "I think I might. Stand by, and someone will be there to help him soon." He glared back to the screen, his expression serious. "All right, Lark, you come on board and help our crewmen. Help with the repairs, and then we go from there. But if you try anything, you'll kill me, and I'm sure you have the technology to make it painful. I get it. Open your ship, and I'll come on board," he interjected. Akron gestured to Lauren, who began the landing sequence. He then turned to Angel. "Meet our guest by the entrance and lead him to the medical bay." The hard glint in his eye warned her to be careful. Angel ran at full speed to the entrance. Tears stung her eyes, and she felt her breath catch in her throat. She was uncomfortable around Reynard and his overly friendly attitude, but she didn't want him to die. The seconds seemed to drag as she felt the ship land, and the hatch opened to extend the landing ramp. A moment after the ramp went down, she saw the stranger running towards her. He was tall, and the top of her head just barely crested his collarbone. He was lean, wearing a gray tunic with a long, dark blue cloak. However, his most notable feature was a large sword sheathed to his side. "I can take you to medical, but I don't think," she started. "Right, sorry, used to bring it everywhere." He faltered and quickly pulled the red-tinted blade from its sheath, making a loud ring that echoed on the halls. Then, without hesitation, he threw the weapon back outside. She hurried through the ship with Lark in pursuit. They flew past the drive room to the ladder leading down to the lower level. They skipped doors, indicating living quarters, as she came to the hall's end and opened the medical bay door. The room was large, with a surgical suite to the left encased in windows that sealed it shut to keep it sterile. 4 beds made up the right side where any sick or injured could recuperate. In the center was an elaborate examination table where a screaming Reynard lay. His fingertips were covered in blood and ichor from where he clawed at the rotting flesh that rapidly spread across his abdomen. Valiantly, Maya was trying, yet failing, to hold him down and prevent him from hurting himself further. "Are you here to help him?" Maya barked as his wrist broke free, and he raked the skin of his neck that was already speckling black. Lark nodded, tossed his cloak onto an empty bed, and moved so quickly that Reynard's side that Angel could hardly track him. He took a moment to examine the wound before placing one hand on the screaming man's face and his other hand directly on the open chest wound. Reynard roared in pain and could only stay in place because of the unrelenting force of the man's hands on his body. "You can't just touch an open wound like that," Maya snapped and attempted to pull his hand back, but she couldn't budge him either. "The infection he has is far worse than anything I might give him, and I can cure it all if I can just..." He closed his eyes, and his brow furrowed in concentration. Slowly, a light bloomed across his fingers until his entire hand glowed white, causing Maya and Angel to step back in surprise. Reynard moaned loudly, but it was significantly quieter than moments before. Angel watched in wonder as the light from Lark's hand spread into Reynard's body. The glow seeped into the wounds and spread until all traces of the infected flesh were covered. Every second that passed, the groans of pain became quieter until Reynard lay still. He was unconscious, but his breathing was steady, and the vital signs that beeped from the monitors were a steady rhythm. Lark pulled his hands back and was unceremoniously shoved aside by Maya, desperate to examine her patient. Her jaw dropped in awe, seeing healthy pink tissue glistening in the light where just before it had been putrid and practically melting away to a black sludge. Reynard would certainly have scars, but he would live. All that was left now was applying clean bandages on the deepest wounds and running a regenerator over the rest. She got to work while Reynard slept peacefully. Angel was so fixated on the scene that she didn't notice Lark had retrieved his cloak and approached her from behind. "I need to see the other parts of the ship that were damaged," he said firmly, causing her to jump in surprise. Tearing her eyes from her fellow crew member, Angel led him back out of the medical bay. "Thank you for your help," Maya called after him. The relief in her voice was almost tangible. "You're welcome. He's going to need a great deal of rest to recover, but he should do better within a day or two," Lark responded over his shoulder and pursued Angel to the damaged section in the drive room. Hours later, Lark stood in the mess hall with most of the crew of the Forerunner. Dravik was finishing repairs on the weapons system, and Reynard was still in the medical bay with Maya, who watched for any change in his condition. Angel watched Lark as he spoke with Akron. She kept thinking about his strange power, how it healed Reynard and the hull of the ship. Curing the damage to the drive room took considerably more time, but despite the effort, Lark didn't appear fatigued at all. Thanks to him, the corrosion was cleared, and now it was just a matter of standard repairs to the ship itself. She silently wondered what else this mysterious stranger was capable of. "Your people can't use magic at all," Lark asked incredulously. "I thought that since we appear to be the same race, you had some kind of abilities. Even the Stonekin have basic magical talents for stonework and metal shaping." Akron sat lost in thought, the recent events and information starting to wear on his mind. Finally, he shook his head and regarded Lark. "No, we've encountered different kinds of technology, but never anything that can be described as magic." "I'm more worried about Adura and his conclave. Do we have to worry about them coming after us again?" Lauren asked, cocking her head to the side. Lark nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so. You and your ship are by far the most advanced technology we've ever seen, which means the conclave will do anything they can to capture and learn from it." "So you're the one who gave us that message warning us about Adura," Lauren pointed out with a wry smile. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Lark replied with a dismissive shrug. Lauren stared at him in disbelief, but his attention was quickly diverted elsewhere. "What is the conclave, exactly?" Akron asked, and motioned for Lark to sit across from him. Lark sat and pulled out a small yet detailed map of an enormous continent. "Centuries ago, our people settled into 3 kingdoms. Sosaria, to the east, where I'm from," he described, and placed his finger on a marker on the coast. His hand drew towards the center and traced a mountain range. The stone talons, trailing up, he pointed to a large forest that spanned the entire northwest, the star canopies. "We always had magic, but one aspect of it was forbidden, entropy magic." He pointed at the bottom of the continent, where an image of a tall black citadel stood. A group decided they didn't want to be held by ancient superstitions, and practiced it in secret. They used it to conduct experiments and extend their lifespans. Naturally, when they were discovered, they were sent into exile. He leveled his gaze at Akron as he folded the map back up. "Unfortunately, that group also had many of our most brilliant scientists, as well as some of our most powerful magic users. And they were the beginning of the conclave," Akron stated flatly. "Yes, they were led by Darkos, a man who, at the time, was a hero, and considered the most powerful magic user among our people. That gravity barrier that pulled you in and prevents you from leaving, you can thank him for that. They have made it their mission to enslave the rest of Durance. Use us to bolster their numbers, then go out to find other worlds to conquer. His voice grew furious until he practically spat out the words. Lily Caius, the crew botanist, raised her hand. She had chin-length brown hair, amber eyes, and wore a lab coat 2 sizes too big, covered in green stains. She was the shortest crew member, just under Lauren's height, and she practically hid behind Reynard. When Akron motioned for her to continue, she wrung her hands and spoke in a hushed tone. We need to make it clear that we have laws about involving ourselves in politics and conflicts of other cultures. Her mouth snapped shut when she was done, and she studied him with worry. Akron flashed her a warm smile. Yes, we do, and you have every right to bring that up, crewwoman. Standing straight, he turned back to Lark and clarified in a firm voice. As much as we appreciate your help, I hope you understand we can't fight in your conflict. Lark held up his hands and shook his head vigorously. I would never ask off-worlders to fight the Conclave. They're our problem. The crew breathed a sigh of relief in unison. But I am curious. What are you people doing here? Lark asked. Akron's eyes fixed on where the map had sat as he briefly wrestled with something in his mind. After a minute of contemplation, he finally spoke. Well, you told us your story. I suppose it's only fair. We come from the Soledad system, roughly 500 light-years from here. Lark's eyes widened in surprise. Akron continued. We're allied with 3 other planets in our system. We share technology resources and defend each other in conflict. The way his jaw hardened at the word conflict, and something about the tone of his voice, told Lark that it would be better not to pry. He heeded the silent hint and said nothing. 5 years ago, our scientists developed what we call the Nova Drive, capable of traveling many times the speed of light. Afterward, they sent out ships to explore neighboring systems for diplomacy, resources, and exploration. The Forerunner is one of those ships. And so, you found our world, Lark finished with a bitter chuckle. Yes, all thanks to Angel here. Akron huffed, proudly, and pointed behind him. Some of the technological upgrades, including the enhanced sensors, are because of her theories. At first, we thought it was a perfect location for what we were looking for, but we were drawn and trapped here instead. Angel's face flushed from the sudden acknowledgement. She shifted uncomfortably at being regarded by the stranger, but did not lower her eyes. After observing her reaction, Lark broke eye contact and returned to Akron. So, what will you do now? Good question, Akron remarked. Repairs should be done within a day, but after that, I'm not sure. We would prefer to continue our mission and explore the planet. But if the Conclave is going to hunt us down, I'm worried about being able to handle our next encounter. Then let us help you, Lark offered. I'll lead you to Sosaria. We have enhancements there that can protect you from their attacks. But what will you want in return? Akron asked, with folded arms as he regarded Lark with renewed suspicion. Anything you can offer, he answered with a shrug. If you have technology you're willing to share, that's great. Otherwise, our historians would love to know about an entire culture from another star system. If nothing else, we have our own laws. One of our first is that we always help innocent people that are attacked by the Conclave. Akron cocked his head and studied the young man briefly, as though trying to peer into his mind. He held his hand out, and Lark grasped it firmly as they shook hands. Then we should hurry. Based on the geography and that map he showed me, it should take us a few days to get there, Akron predicted, as he gestured out the window to Lark's vehicle. Your ship should be able to fit in our cargo bay, and you can be our guest until we reach Sosaria. Lark nodded politely, and Akron went to grab a bite to eat. Tarn had just brought in a plate of sandwiches and set them on a table against the farthest wall. Lark stepped away from the hungry crowd and descended on the platter. Seizing his opportunity, Bastian darted forward, fiercely grabbed Lark's hand, and shook it enthusiastically. Mr. Lark, my name is Bastian Lasser, and I would love to have a conversation with you about your history and language, he proclaimed in an excited voice that grew higher in pitch the more he spoke. Bastian towered over Lark. He was the tallest member of the crew, at just over 2 meters. Ooh, boy, lad's big. His pale, almost white blonde hair was cropped close to his scalp, and his face was always clean-shaven. His hazel eyes glittered with excitement, and he grinned madly. Angel couldn't restrain a small chuckle as she watched Lark's jaw drop in surprise at the man's exuberance. A sudden thought began to gnaw at her brain. There was one crucial detail they were keeping from their new acquaintance. She pushed aside the anxiety of talking to her captain for what she felt was more important and purposefully walked up to Akron. Satisfied that Lark was still occupied, she dropped her voice and whispered, "Sir, why didn't you mention the children of Alpha?" Akron tilted his head to observe their new acquaintance and ensure he wasn't listening before barely answering above a whisper. "There's no need to bring that up yet. We have enough problems as it is without having to explain our own conflicts." Angel frowned a bit and bit her lower lip as she was wrestling with the thought. "I don't feel comfortable keeping that information secret," he whispered. He replied, disheartened, "Neither do I, but I still want to wait. We might be stuck here for the rest of our lives for all we know. Let's worry about finding a way home before we start bothering these people with our problems." Angel knew the captain was firm on the subject and took her leave. As she slipped from the mess hall, she passed by Lark. Bastian was rapidly firing questions and writing information just as fast in a small journal he always had on hand for such occasions. Lark smiled at Bastian's childlike enthusiasm and didn't show the slightest anxiety at the intense attention. Angel felt a pang of envy, but immediately dismissed it as she left for the drive room. She had to check on Dravik. That brings us to the end of Chapter 3. So yeah, this is things very quickly took a turn for the sinister with Idura, but there was help close at hand. Although Lark denied being the one to send the message, so there's potentially a third party out there still that we haven't met that is keeping an eye on new arrivals. Maybe against the Conclave, maybe within the Conclave, but against Idura. It's hard to tell. It's too soon to really. It might just be that Lark is ashamed to say it himself. But this is all an interesting take on the sci-fi so far. You see like some almost Star Trek-y influences in how the crew is situated, but it seems like a nice small-sized crew, so it's almost like a family sort of dynamic you see going on. The introduction of magic is interesting. It will be interesting to see how it comes up and how the interplay with the magic and the science and the sci-fi come out. So I'm sure we'll get more and more as we see and are exposed to more of both systems as we read more of the book. Let's try and get one more chapter in before we take a quick break. So let's just keep rolling. So, Chapter 4. There was so much to learn, but not nearly enough time to understand it. The next day, Angel entered the cargo bay, feeling perturbed. She had been told that she was to be Lark's guide on the ship, and was expected to give him a tour and answer any questions he had. Akron made it clear that between their initial encounter and Lark showing an interest in the technology she had developed, she was the ideal candidate. She had voiced her exasperation that they were supposed to keep their technology under wraps, but the captain had simply replied that after healing Reynard, it was the least they could do. With that, the discussion was over, and Angel found herself with the dubious honor of escorting their new guest around. Yeah, that makes sense. The Firefly is the closest of the crew is a good corollary, but then the military... Yeah, I can definitely see where you were going for. Now, she took a deep breath and rehearsed the excuse she had been formulating all morning in her head as she approached her destination. However, when she entered the cargo bay, she stopped short when she saw it was empty, aside from the foreign vehicle. She walked over to the small vessel and knocked loudly on the cockpit. She heard a loud thunk in response. "What? Ow!" A voice yelped from underneath. Angel jumped in surprise, then peeked under the vessel to find Lark rubbing his head with a small repair tool in his hand. "I'm really sorry about that. Are you all right?" she asked as she knelt beside him. "Yeah, I'm just not used to being caught by surprise like that," he replied. "You're pretty quiet when you walk." With a soft grunt, he pulled himself out from under the hull of his vehicle and stood straight up. Angel found herself at eye level with Lark's defined stomach muscles, and she felt a blush creep across her cheeks. "I'm grateful you have the time to help me out," he said warmly, as he took his tunic off the hood. As he turned, she saw the scars that littered his body. His back was a mess of marks that ranged from paper-cut size all the way to a scar that her pinky could easily fit between the margins. His chest was in a similar state, with a jagged scar that ran from his right shoulder down to his navel, and his belly was flecked with evidence of long-healed wounds. He reached down and offered to help her up. Numbly, Angel took his hand and felt the effortless way he pulled her to her feet. His hand was calloused, but, in a way, still warm and soft. Lark cocked his head to the side expectantly, and Angel realized with embarrassment that she was still studying him. "I'm sorry, but I'm not much of a tour guide, sir. I think you would be better off with someone else," she stammered, stepping back from him. Their closeness had been a bit too much. "Fine by me, no tour then," he agreed, tossed the repair tool out onto the seat of his vessel, and donned his tunic. She blinked in confusion. "What do you want then?" He shrugged and ran his fingers over his scalp, wincing as he brushed the spot where he had hit the undercarriage. "What I truly want is someone familiar with the ship's systems, so I can begin planning what upgrades we can give you for your next encounter with the Conclave. Someone who is already working on improving the ship would be invaluable to me." He checked his vehicle to ensure everything was in order before picking up a small bag and shutting the hatch. Angel bit her lower lip as she processed the new information. She hadn't expected such a good reason for him wanting her specifically. Her excuses evaporated, and she hung her head in resignation. "All right, where do we go first?" "Your captain told me I could have quarters of my own. He was amused when he found me sleeping under my ship, and said something could be arranged today. I'd like to drop my things off there, get some food, and then we can start with whatever works for you." He slung the bag over his shoulder and offered her a friendly grin. A small smile formed on her lips. She beckoned Lark to follow her, and led them to the ship's living quarters first. His easygoing nature made her feel more relaxed as time passed, and, somehow, she ended up giving him a tour. The bridge, drive room, and mess hall made the top level, along with the hatch for personnel to enter and exit the ship. The second level held the medical bay and all living quarters. The bottom level was the largest, with storage, a hydroponics lab, a recreation room, and a cargo bay with a hatch for loading and unloading large cargo. Lark commented on more than one occasion about the advanced design of the ship. However, his words were laced with wonder and appreciation, while lacking the greedy aggression Adura had. Angel stood at the mess hall counter and waited patiently to be given her food. The morning had been spent reviewing many of their systems, power and weapons excluded. Lark had proven to be an attentive listener, while asking thoughtful questions regularly. Tarn gave her a nod in greeting, and scooped a generous bowl of root vegetable stew. She received a second one and turned to go back to the table they had selected. As she approached, her mouth fell open in shock. He was reading her datapad. "Put that down!" she barked, much louder than she meant to, startling everyone in the room. She practically threw the bowls onto the table and snatched the pad from his hands. "I'm sorry. You kept referencing it for your theories on sensor technology. I thought it would save us both some time if I read it," he apologized, and held his hands up to placate her anger. "Yes, but it's private!" she exclaimed, feeling extremely distraught at the invasion of privacy from a man she barely knew. "This isn't just a device to store data. It's where we store personal logs, thoughts, and other things. How did you even get this?" Lark looked sheepishly at his hands. "When you got in line, it fell out of your pocket. I was going to give it back when you came to the table." She held the pad tightly in her hands and took several steadying breaths as she tried to regain control of her emotions. Hot regret burned through her from not grabbing her holster that morning. Her pad was constantly falling out of her pocket otherwise. "Again, I am sorry," he emphasized, softer this time. "I know, but you really should know better," she grumbled. "Though no one here can seem to understand my theories, so why should you?" "I did, actually. Not all of it, mind you, but quite a bit. Your theory about energy being split off by the prism of the Nova Drive was particularly interesting. Made me think of a band of frequencies," he said, shrugging off her barb and smiling at her once again. She sat dumbfounded at his words, thinking to herself that most of the other crew wouldn't have been able to put it so succinctly. Even Dravik occasionally found her theories too complicated. "How? I don't... But your vessel is so simple compared to ours. I thought this kind of science would be too much for you." Her voice grew subdued, and her eyes dropped to her food, feeling guilty for her assumption. "In a way, it is," he admitted. "The concept of traveling faster than light still makes my head hurt. However, energy production, energy frequencies, and the way you put it all together is very similar to what we do. It even sounds close to how our magic functions." He took another bite of his food. When his attention was fixed to his bowl, she sighed quietly and shook her head. She was conflicted between her anxiety that he had read her datapad, but also disarmed by his friendly demeanor and the delightful feeling that someone might finally understand her work. Yet again, she found herself trying to think of excuses to possibly get out of this. "Your poetry is beautiful, by the way," he volunteered after he swallowed a mouthful of vegetables. Angel choked on her food and felt her heart plummet to her toes. She struck her chest with her palm to dislodge the piece that had become stuck. Lark's eyes went wide with concern, but soon she was gasping for breath with tears in her eyes. "You read it?" He blinked slowly before affirming, cautiously, "Yes. I especially like how you compare emotions to weather patterns, that you find happiness in rain and passion in storms." She stared at him and pursed her lips together in a tight line. Never in her life did she ever plan to show that to anyone, let alone get their opinion. Her heart thundered at the combination of indignant anger and joy at his words. "Poetry from another world would be a big hit back home. I bet you could stir up a large audience there with your work." He set the empty bowl aside and looked at her intently. Silence stretched out between them. Her eyes were fixed down at the table, and she sat with her hands balled up in her lap. Lark tilted his head slightly before shaking it and covering his face with one hand. "I'm sorry, Angel. I'm not great at picking up on people's boundaries, and it's obvious I have pushed beyond yours." He stood up without warning and gave her a formal nod. "I'll talk to someone else about what I need to know, and you don't have to worry about me." A moment before, all she could think of was how to run away. Now, he was trying to flee, and she felt abashed. She realized he had only been trying to compliment her, and he hadn't read her personal thoughts maliciously. As he turned to leave, her hand caught his sleeve, and she tugged for him to sit back down. "No, I'm sorry. I know what you did was an accident, and what you said was lovely," she fretted in a rush, and dropped her hand back to her lap. "You just need to understand that it was deeply personal, and I didn't expect anyone to ever read it." Lark said nothing, but was rooted to his spot. Angel smiled weakly, and patted the opposite side of the table. "Here, why don't you tell me more about your magic? I've been curious about it since I saw you healing Reynard." Lark took his place again, and held out his left hand. A second later, tiny orbs of light illuminated his palm, and Angel's expression changed to one of abject fascination. "Magic is what we call harnessing energy from the forces of nature," he began. "Air, water, fire, and earth." As though commanded, a corresponding light glowed brighter, indicating the elements he described as he spoke. When combined, it can be used as a powerful force to manipulate a person's body, mind, or even spirit. The lights merged in his hand and formed a white light. Angel immediately recognized that it was like the power he'd used the day before. "That's what you used to heal Reynard, isn't it?" she observed in awe. "Yes, we call it essence magic. It's a power that can only be used by the most skilled magic users. It can be used to heal wounds, restore a person's health, or destroy corrupt beings. However, it can only be used under the right circumstances," he explained, closing his hand. The light was extinguished, and the table seemed darker without its presence. "What kind of circumstances?" Angel leaned forward, and she placed her chin on her hands. Her curiosity grew more with each new fact he provided, and her shyness melted away. "It's a bit complicated, but suffice it to say it can only be used to help people. For example, healing or defending someone's life," he informed. "But most importantly, it can be used to counter entropy magic. Anyone trained to fight and use essence magic is recruited into the Archblades, Sosaria's elite fighting force." The last words were stated with distinct pride, and he even held himself a bit higher in his seat. "So then, what about manipulating the spirit? Is that part of what entropy magic does?" Angel asked. Lark beamed, obviously impressed by her insight. "Yes, elemental forces can be corrupted into entropy magic. It can be used to raise bodies from the dead, warp a person into a hideous monster, and many other horrible things." His tone became bitter, and he scowled as he spoke. "So, what you're saying is that essence magic and entropy magic are the same power, but just different polarities of it," she theorized, and stared at the ceiling in contemplation. It was so much information, but she reveled in it. "What? No!" he snapped, shaking his head in frustration. "They are complete opposites. How could you think that?" Angel blinked in surprise. "Well, you said that essence magic and entropy magic are each a combination of the elemental forces of nature, yes?" Lark nodded slowly and folded his arms, waiting for her to continue. "They even have similar qualities in which they can do amazing or horrible things to a person. It sounds to me as though they are the same thing, but just used very differently, like a positive and a negative charge of a magnetic force." Lark stared at her dumbfounded. He opened and shut his mouth several times as he tried to formulate any words. I never thought of them in that way. They're just always viewed as good and evil, opposing forces. I never considered they could be the same kind of magic running on a spectrum. He sat back and took long, deep breaths. No one has. Research into entropy magic is forbidden, leaving little room for speculation on its nature or relation to essence magic. He appeared to stare off into space. Absolutely incredible. Angel let out a small, pleasurable sigh to his flattering concession. You don't take any time to study the origins of your power? Lark's attention snapped back to her, and he appeared bashful. No, I just use it to help people and fight. I never really thought much about the science behind it. Their conversation lasted far past lunch. He was genuine with his compliments to her, and his humor was often self-deprecating in a beguiling way. They spent the entire time talking about magic and technology, and she was surprised to find that the first topic interested her as much as the other. Hope I'm not interrupting anything, Akron's voice startled them both. Angel turned and gave a reflexive salute. No, sir, just enjoying lunch and having some friendly culture exchange, she stated. You mean dinner, right? That's what brought me here. Akron motioned behind him to the clock on the wall. Angel gasped, utterly shocked at how many hours had passed during her conversation with Lark. She stumbled over her words, attempting to apologize. Sorry, Captain. She has been spending the day giving me entirely new ways to think about my people's abilities. It's been really enlightening, Lark declared with a smile. Think nothing of it. I'm happy she's making you feel welcome, Akron chuckled and patted him on the shoulder. But I wanted to ask you something. We're running low on energy, and I was curious if you knew of any dense vegetation we could gather to keep us going. Lark blinked in confusion. Vegetation? Your ship runs on plants. Any biological material, honestly. We prefer vegetation because it's easier to gather and tends to be more plentiful. The more densely packed with nutrients, the more power we can harness from it. I'd prefer we gather material from the planet before dipping into our reserves, Akron answered. Lark ran a hand through his hair as he pondered the question. He closed his eyes briefly, imagining their route and nearby areas. There is a small forest on the way, with a bit of a detour towards the mountains. The lumber there is lousy because it shatters when struck, but there should be plenty to gather. When we reach Sosaria, there may be something better for you, though. Good! Angel, can you run to the bridge and tell... Akron began, but stopped when he realized Angel had disappeared while she was speaking with their guest. Did she miss a shift or something? Lark asked, looking at the clock with concern. No, she just does that sometimes. Don't take it personally. I wouldn't mind some company if you're free. You can tell me more about what we can expect between here and your home, Akron offered. Lark agreed and watched Akron return to the counter to get some food. He cast a glance at where the door Angel would have escaped through and wondered if everything was all right. Angel sat on her bed. Her books were put away and her pad was balanced on her knees. She had been trying to reread her poems, but couldn't get through more than a few words before her mind slipped to other topics. It didn't help that she was reading the one about storms, coincidentally her favorite one. Finally, she dropped her head back to stare at the ceiling. She never lost track of time like that, ever. The fact that it happened at all bothered her immensely. The day's events kept replaying in her mind, but she couldn't see where she had gone wrong. Her conversations with Lark continually popped up, with the startling realization that he managed to make her feel more at ease than she had ever anticipated. She shook her head and told herself she was becoming far too comfortable with him. It was a professional mission, and she needed to maintain the composure and distance she had learned in her training. Satisfied when she identified the problem and came up with a solution, she reassured herself that everything would go back to normal tomorrow. Finally, allowing herself to relax, she drifted off to sleep. But at the edge of her thoughts were his kind words about her poetry. Hey, I mean, that brings us to the end of chapter 4, and there's nothing wrong with, ships running on plants. You look at various other examples in fiction, you look at Satisfactory, and one of the first power sources you get is a biomass generator. So, there's all sorts of options, and with an efficient enough extraction, anything is possible. High science and science fiction, it's best just to accept these things, right? Alright, so it is a little past 9 right now, and my drink has gone dry. So, let's take a few minutes. I will top myself back up, and stretch my legs for a little bit. We'll be back in just a few minutes to resume with Chapter 5. We'll get a few more chapters in tonight and see where we leave off. So, alright, we'll be back in just a little bit. Thanks so much, guys! Okay, we are back. Simba's wandered off, so we'll set him aside there. Yeah, so far it's been quite interesting. That we're getting to see more and more of the characters. Angel seems adorable. Kind of the stereotypical wallflower, like lives more in her head than in the real world sort. But just because you've seen the type 1,000 times doesn't mean you can't like the type. Akron seems to have a little bit of Kirk in him. So there's corollaries to other fiction and other character archetypes that we've seen before, but spun out in ways that are interesting and relatable. So it's nice. It's fun to see how it plays out. And now that we're seeing Lark and starting to get the cross culture and references between the two different cultures, the revelation that the essence magic and the entropic magic are the light side and the dark side of the Force that we've seen in other things. So it's you can see the corollaries, you can see the things you can kind of root your own understanding in. So it's one of the nice things about some of these systems, that they're not so far out that you need to build your own understanding from the ground up. There's things that are just similar enough that you're just like, okay, yeah, accept it. It's like, yeah, that works. So it's so far it's interesting. It's not like crazy high head in the clouds sci-fi or fantasy where you have to spend the first 6 hours to try and find your bearings and find your legs. You're able to just hit the ground running and enjoy it, take it in as it comes. So let's go ahead and continue with chapter 5. The first time we saw them, we were horrified. How could such abominations exist? Angel gathered an armful of wood, thinking to herself that this was nothing like her normal routine. She and the other junior crew members were ordered to gather materials, which meant Bastion, Lily, and her were outside in the hot weather. Reynard was still recovering and had voiced an apology for not being able to join them. To their relief, Lark volunteered to help move the lumber. He talked easily with Bastion about what Sosarian history he could remember, making sure to preface on more than one occasion that he was no historian, and his knowledge was extremely limited. However, that didn't stop Bastion from hounding him for any extra details he could scrounge up. "Food's up!" Tarn's voice bellowed from the entrance to the ship. Everyone stopped what they were doing and surrounded the cook. "This is much nicer than I would have expected," Lark commented between mouthfuls. "We're out doing hard work. There's always quality food available for that," Bastion beamed. Tarn's expression softened and nodded in affirmation. "The captain takes excellent care of us," Lily explained. "He can be a bit gruff at times, but he cares about us, and is more than fair about assigning work." The group fell silent as they finished their delicious meal. "He wants an update," Tarn stated with a low, rumbling tone as he tucked the empty platter under his arm. "Fuel supply is about 80%, Angel reported. Should take us an hour, maybe a bit more to finish up. Fortunately, the trees here are energy dense, so we don't need much." Tarn nodded and disappeared into the ship to report back to Akron. The heat was oppressive, and they were all covered in a layer of sweat. The general mood was lifted further by nearly completing their task, and they acknowledged that they would soon return to the temperature-controlled ship. A low hum reverberated around Lark as he passed his hand through the air. Moments later it was dripping with what appeared to be water, and he raked his fingers through his hair with a loud sigh of relief. Bastion and Lily watched in fascination, but Angel simply returned to her work, further away than before. "So why are you the only ones out here hauling wood?" Lark asked, as he stretched his arms and rolled his tired shoulders. "Crew work," Lily responded as she picked leaves from her hair. "We do the menial tasks and general duties throughout the ship." "So the rest are higher ranked?" Lark motioned towards the ship. "That's right. Tarn, Maya, Dravik, and Lauren are all officers, so they mainly stay in their areas of expertise while we assist." Lily finished with a parting wave as she moved further into the forest to find more stray wood. Bastion laid a small log across his forearm, taking the chance to continue their conversation. "You told us before your people split off from each other centuries ago. Can you possibly be more specific?" "I can't say for certain, but I think it was somewhere around 1,000 years ago," Lark answered as he picked up an even larger log. "Fascinating. Do you know if they had ships or space travel at the time? We have records about our own origins that tell how our forebears abandoned their technology and had to almost start over entirely, but it is never said why." Bastion enthused as he loaded a second log into his arms. "I truly don't know. If there was any advanced technology, chances are the Conclave has it," Lark replied bitterly. Bastion felt the tension in the air, fell silent, and carefully balanced the wood on his shoulder. His arm felt overloaded, and he hurriedly tossed the logs into the rolling bin that would take the fuel to the drive room. Biting the inside of his cheek, he thought for a time before perking back up and turning to Lark again. "Why do you use swords when you have access to more advanced technology like the blasters on your vessel?" Lark stood straight and brought his sword out, running a careful hand along the edge. The weapons on my strider take an enormous amount of energy, so we use them sparingly, he explained. Also, swords and magic are far more effective against conclave monsters. Bastian effortlessly moved on to his next question. What about your language? Do the other people here speak the same language as you do? Lark dumped his load into the bin and wiped his hands on his black trousers. Yes, they have certain terms and expressions that are unique to their cultures. However, the Stoneskin, the Treekin, and the Ravagers all speak the same language as we do. Ravagers? What are... An ear-splitting scream that pierced the sparse forest interrupted Bastian's questions. Lark immediately broke into a full run. His speed was shocking, but it only took a few extra moments for Bastian and Angel to regain their wits and pursue him. It didn't take long to find the origin of the screams. Lily stood with her back pressed against a huge tree, her brown eyes wide in terror. A small energy weapon trembled in her hands as she aimed at the creature before her. "Stay back!" she cried out. It might have been a typical person at one point, but now it was twisted and wrong. The limbs twitched, and its torso rocked back and forth as though it had been held by a string that was cut. Shredded clothing clung to its body, which could no longer be identified as male or female. Its skin was mottled gray and sloughed off all over. A foul stench emanated from its open wounds that were a little more than weeping holes that muscle and bone could be seen through. The head lolled forward with cloudy white eyes that fixated on Lily as it lurched and shambled towards its terrified target. Without hesitation, Lark leaped forward and struck the creature with his sword. His blade sang through the air as it bit into the decomposing body. The edges glowed brilliant white with essence magic. Like a piece of paper caught in a flame, the creature's flesh burned away, rapidly disintegrating, until only a pile of blackened bones and cloth scraps were left in its place. "Did it touch you?" Lark demanded as he turned to face her. Her face crumpled. She gasped out a sob and threw her arms around his neck as she burst into tears. Thank you," she chanted frantically against his chest. Lark was frozen in shock at her reaction. Stiffly, he reached up with his free hand and returned a small hug before extracting himself from her grip. He visually searched around wildly through the trees, as though trying to find more foes. "These things are never alone. Contact your captain and tell him we need to leave. Now!" He shouted with as much authority as he could muster. Bastian was already sending communication through his pad before Lark's sentence was even finished. As the four made a mad dash back towards the ship, the area was eerily quiet, as though silence had claimed all other life in the forest. The stillness lasted only moments before the sounds of gurgling and shuffling footsteps echoed through the trees. Angel looked behind her in horror as the once peaceful grove was now surrounded by an army of grotesque monsters. Blasts of energy knocked the creatures to the ground, fired from hand weapons and magic. The crew's weapons did little more than slow the oppressive march, with the magical attacks from Lark's blade seeming to be the only thing genuinely effective against them. When they were 50 meters from safety, they stopped in their tracks and saw a large group of the creatures had already swarmed around the ship. A few had already made contact with the side and pointlessly scratched at the metal hull. "They're blocking our way. I don't think this is a coincidence," Angel observed through gritted teeth and fired into the horde as quickly as possible. "It's not. They have only the smallest hint of instinct and virtually no intelligence. If they are acting like this, chances are the Conclave set them up as a trap." Lark snarled. He took a few steps forward and gripped his sword in both hands. "I'll make an opening. Run as fast as you can, and don't stop for anything. If any of them touch you, go to your medical bay, and under no circumstances do you hide any wounds." He didn't bother to find out if they heard or even if they agreed. An instant later, he charged forward, blade first into the group of creatures. Putrefied blood and body parts flew as Lark savagely attacked them. Fire erupted from his fingertips, and essence magic surged through his weapon. Pieces of the creatures evaporated in a glittering haze before they could hit the ground. Angel stood glued to the spot as she watched him. She could hardly believe this was the same easygoing man who she shared a meal with the day before. Without warning, Lily's small hand clamped down on her arm and snapped her back to reality. She tightened her hold on her weapon and followed her crewmates to the ship. With a loud roar, the engine exhaust fired up and drowned out the sounds of combat. Leaning out of the open, Akron, Dravik, and Tarn stood firing at the monstrosities, and when they caught sight of their allies, they waved frantically and called them inside. The narrow path that Lark had opened for them was steadily growing larger as the crew of the ship picked off the creatures with their weapons. As soon as she reached the top of the landing, Tarn grabbed Lily and pushed behind him as he leveled the extended barrel of a rifle toward a creature that was pursuing her. He gazed down the scope and fired, Energy blasted straight through its chest, leaving a hole large enough that light could shine through. It teetered at first with a gurgle, but continued to approach, unfazed by its injury. Tarn hissed an uncharacteristic curse and aimed again for the head this time. Just as Angel began to fall behind, Bastion scooped her up in his arms and carried her up the ramp as fast as his long legs could go. At the last step, he tripped on an errant stick and crashed to the ground with an indignant shout. Angel fell as he went down, and her shoulder rammed into the entrance of the hatch. She cried out as the solid metal bit into her flesh, but she pushed past it to scramble inside. Once safe, she turned to watch the battle unfold, her pain forgotten. Akron shouted for Lark to run for the ship, but there was no reaction. Lark continued to fight creature after creature without showing signs of stopping. His clothes were torn and stained with blood from where the monsters had briefly struck him before being cut down. Akron clenched his teeth and searched around to see if there was anything he could use to get Lark's attention. In the corner of his eye, he saw a medium-sized stick that had fallen from the fuel carts. He wound up his arm and chucked it as hard as he could, right at the back of the young man's head. Lark whipped around and sliced the stick in two, mistaking it for another enemy. Using that moment of distraction, the crew shouted his name and beckoned for him to come back to the ship. Without hesitating, he whirled around to the endless wave of creatures bearing down on him. He balled up his empty fist and let out a roar as a burst of white energy erupted, with him as the epicenter. Dozens of the creatures fell back, and those closest to him crumbled to nothingness. He ran to the ship, and as soon as he dove through the hatch, Akron slammed it shut and shouted through the communication system for Lauren. "Get us out of here, now!" The hull beneath their feet vibrated as the ship's engines surged and pushed them from the ground. Those who were standing swayed as they tried to keep their balance as the ship lurched forward. "Is everyone all right?" Akron called out when the ship had reached cruising speed, receiving nods and shaky confirmation. "Good. I want all of you to report to the medical bay for a full examination from Maya. That includes you, Lark," Akron ordered. Without hesitation, all four of them headed toward the medical bay at his command. After shakily standing, Bastion nearly collapsed again when he put weight on his left ankle. Lark caught him in time and braced the taller man as they walked together down the hall. As Maya examined the three crew members, Lark stood by in case they needed his magic to heal any entropic wounds or infections they might have received. Bastion was the most injured person, his ankle already swollen to nearly twice its size by the time they worked his boot off. Maya passed a handheld regenerator over it until it reduced in size. She noticed Lark staring at the device as she healed the crew members. She held it up on display to him. "We can heal many injuries rapidly with our medical technology," Maya explained, as she demonstrated its use on Bastion's leg. "It's the same that I used on Reynard after Adura's attack." "Interesting," he observed. After giving him a mild analgesic, Bastion was sent to his room to rest and recuperate. But once in the hallway, the scholar took a sharp turn towards the ladder leading to the rest of the ship. He had too much to catalog about the day's events to waste time resting. Angel hung back against the wall as Lily took a seat on the exam table. Maya found no injuries, so Lily was cleared for full duty and sent to her shift in the hydroponics bay. It had recently been filled with plant life from Durance, sparking her enthusiasm and providing a much-needed distraction from the attack. "Angel?" Maya asked with a raised bow. "He can go first," Angel mumbled. "You're cradling your arm. He's standing just fine. Hop on the bed," Maya stated in a no-nonsense tone. With a resigned sigh, Angel sat at the end of the bed, meeting Lark's eyes over Maya's shoulder. He watched her curiously. "You have some deep bruising, but thankfully nothing tore. Just don't lift anything heavy for the next few days," Maya ordered as she gave Angel a regenerator treatment. "I won't," Angel agreed, looking much more at ease by the time she left. "And now you," Maya stated, placing her hands on her hips, looking extremely determined. "Me?" Lark asked dubiously. "You," she confirmed. "Let's see your wounds." "I'm fine," Lark replied and held his hands up. "See, I'm already healing." The air around his hand shimmered, and he ran his palms over his injuries. Each one glowed brightly like a small star that faded as the wound healed shut. "See? Healed and cleansed in one easy move," he pointed out with a cheeky grin. "All right, but if you feel anything out of the ordinary, especially aches or a fever, you let me know immediately," Maya ordered firmly. "Yes, doctor," Lark promised with a slight bow and promptly left the room. He passed by Akron, who was standing outside the doors. The captain nodded in acknowledgement, but said nothing. Heaving a great sigh, he then entered the medical bay and approached his wife. "Hell of a day we had." Akron kissed her cheek and sat on the examination bed. Hell of a few days from what I've seen, Maya agreed gently, and stood at his knees with her forehead resting against his. Akron grunted and wrapped his arms around her, burying his nose in the nape of her neck. At times like this, her role as a wife felt far more important than that of a doctor. She squeezed him tight and patiently waited for him to speak his mind. This is a lot more than we signed up for. Fighting the children of Alpha is one thing, but this involves magic and forces we can't hope to match. Give me one of their martyred over a pack of these things any day, Akron murmured. His eyes closed as he recalled the sight of the creatures clawing their way after his crew. I know. I wish we could get away from this horrible place, Maya admitted, stroking his graying hair. That makes two of us. The more I see of this conclave and their monsters, the more I worry if we will ever make it out of here alive, Akron said almost hopelessly. Maya stood back, raised her hands, and held her husband's face in her hands, ensuring their gazes met. We might have a chance if we help Lark's people defeat them, she suggested quietly. Akron couldn't even feign surprise at her statement. He knew his wife often questioned their laws of non-interference, and he admired her insistence on speaking her mind with him no matter how difficult it might be. After a few seconds of considering response, he kissed her palm. You might be right. Maya's hands halted in place, thunderstruck. They usually would debate and argue for hours over the subject, but this was one of the first times he had conceded without a fight. Rather than enjoying her victory, she was bothered by his concession, as it showed how troubled he was inside. Silently, she pressed the button on her datapad to lock the door to medical. And that brings us to Chapter 5, wherein the captain considers breaking the Prime Directive. So we've seen the products of the entropic magic now with the creatures, the zombies, undead beasts, twisted abominations. It seems that they can pass on their entropic infection through their attacks, so Lark seemed to be especially sure to double check everyone to be sure that there was no wounds or infections. But we got to see him in real action, put the sword to good use. So we get a nice blending of the fantasy and the sci-fi at this last chapter. That's fair. Yeah, that's you don't want to poison the preconceptions. If you can land on zombies, but you don't want to start from there. That makes sense. All right, let's get through chapter 6. We might be able to get another 2 chapters in tonight. We're just judging on how long these are taking us, but we'll see. We might even get 3. Harsh words lead to rash decisions, yet rash decisions allow you to reflect on yourself. Lark wandered the corridors after leaving the medical bay, lost in thought and not ready to return to his quarters just yet. The ambush was well orchestrated, and it was clear that the Conclave had their eyes on the crew and their ship. They wouldn't give up so easily, especially if Adura had already reported back to Darkos about their advanced technology. He frowned, and his fingers ran over the worn leather of the hilt of his sword. Despite his height, the tip hovered just above the red carpet, and its presence calmed him. After what happened, no one had asked him to remove it, and he had to admit that he felt better being armed. "There you are," a voice called to him from behind. He whirled around to see Lauren, striding up to him with a large smile on her face. "Come on," she ordered, and grasped his arm, practically dragging him down the hallway. "Where are we going?" he asked, confused. "To celebrate!" she exclaimed, and picked up the pace. When they reached the mess hall, the entire crew except Maya and Akron were there. Reynard approached and pushed a glass of champagne into Lark's hand. "Here!" The crew gathered around him, each holding their own drink, and Reynard pulled him into a fierce side hug. Everyone was in a festive mood and smiling at him. Not being used to such a reception, Lark felt more overwhelmed than when he had fought the creature hours before. His eyes met Angel's, and she immediately looked away while shifting closer to the door. She was conveniently on the outer edge of the gathering. Lauren climbed onto a table and raised her glass high, as the rest of the crew did the same. "To Lark, our new friend, who fights like a demon and has saved over half the people on the ship so far. Cheers!" The crew cried in unison and clinked their glasses together. Lark took a swig of the bubbly drink and took the sight around him in awe. "What happened to being on duty?" he asked with a playful smirk. Lily, Reynard, Lauren, and Dravik glanced at each other with a conspiratorial glimmer in their eyes. "What the good captain doesn't know won't hurt him," Dravik chuckled. "Or us," Reynard added with a wink. "We'll get back to our shift soon enough. We just wanted to have a small party to thank you," Lily insisted softly, as though Akron might come barreling through the doors if she spoke any louder. Lark glanced to where Angel had been standing, only to see her back retreating through the door, with her glass left untouched on the table. The door slid shut, and she was gone. "Come on!" Lauren cheered and guided Lark to a table where more refreshments and food were laid out. She flopped onto the bench next to him as he took his seat. "Who taught you to fight like that, anyway?" Lauren inquired, and filled a small plate with food before digging in. "My father trained me since I was a child. I spent most of my life learning and sparring with him," Lark reminisced. "Tell me about him," Lauren exclaimed, and patted Lark on the back forcefully. "His name was Darien. He led the Archblades for over 30 years and was called a great hero in Sosaria," Lark replied and took a bite of a smoked slice of meat that had fallen onto the table. "He dedicated his life to friendship with the other provinces, and even helped to develop the communication armlets we all use." He tapped the silver device on his right forearm. "How about your mother? Was she a great warrior as well?" she asked. "Not exactly. Her name was Lissa. She had been a prodigy of essence magic from a very young age, and she spent her entire life using her abilities to help people." Lark shared and took a sip of his drink and coughed as the bubbles tickled his throat. "To Darien and Lissa for having—" Lauren interrupted herself by staring into the glass. "Damn, I'm out." She pushed herself from the table and walked to the counter, swaying slightly as she moved. Tarn stood on the other side with a frown on his face and held up 4 empty bottles to show that some crew members had started the festivities early. "Bar's closed," he announced. Lark shook his head in amusement as he watched Lauren attempt to negotiate with Tarn to get more alcohol, and glanced around the room to the others. Lily had a glass of juice in one hand and a pastry in the other. She was watching them with fascination as a tipsy Bastien and an exceptionally drunk Reynard were in an arm wrestling contest. Unfortunately, Bastien's arm was so long that Reynard could not gain the upper hand on leverage. However, Bastien wasn't strong enough to push the talented strategist's hand down, so they had been deadlocked for over 5 minutes. Dravik left not long after the party started. He made comments about not having the energy of the youth, as the rest of them did. After permitting himself to enjoy the time at hand and put the conclave from his mind for a short while, Lark pulled a plate of seared meat and roast vegetables in front of him and he eagerly began to eat. After the day he had, he was starving. Angel sat at her station in the drive room after her shift was over. Bastien was due to relieve her soon, but she figured he would probably still be at the party. As she read over the information on her pad, she felt a presence behind her and could tell it wasn't Bastien. "Are you all right?" Lark asked softly. She responded with a slight hum of acknowledgement that did not break attention from her reading. "Glad to hear it." He took a seat in the chair opposite hers. "Most people don't handle seeing a swarm of withered for the first time very well, much less being close enough that could have been torn apart by them." She felt his eyes trace the details of her face, as if he were trying to gauge her thoughts. Finally, she put the pad down and stared hard at him. To her surprise, he was neither facetious nor mocking. "What about Bastien and Lily? They were panicked more than I was after everything was all over." Lark replied easily. "Lily gave me her sincerest thanks already at the party. After seeing the creatures, Bastien and Reynard each cornered me to ask questions about the Conclave's history and how they have used entropy magic to create their forces." He tilted his head slightly with a contemplative look. "You, on the other hand, guard your feelings more carefully." Angel's eyes narrowed slightly at his casual observation. After a moment of consideration, she gave him a wry laugh. "What is an Archblade, exactly? Your actions today show there is much more to you than you've let on." She rested her chin on her knuckles as she shamelessly redirected the conversation. Lark knew to drop his line of questioning. "It's not as though I was trying to hide anything. Everything that happened today is pretty normal for me." "So, the other people in the Archblades fight in the same way you do?" she questioned with a single raised eyebrow. "Not exactly," Lark murmured as he rubbed the back of his neck. "They didn't have the same upbringing that I did." There was something odd about his tone of voice. He sounded almost uncomfortable, but Angel couldn't tell if he was ashamed of himself or trying to be modest. "Are you some kind of elite soldier?" What does it take to be an Archblade? She placed the pad on her thighs as she gave Lark her full attention. The corner of his mouth lifted into a small smile, thinking to himself how she wasn't just curious, she was also highly observant. We get sent on missions to attack Conclave facilities, destroy groups of their monsters, and even sometimes lead troops into battle. Angel's jaw dropped, and her voice became much quieter. You've led troops? Like a general? Lark shook his head frantically. Not me, not personally. Others have, sometimes, but usually they involve dire situations. And you said you must be a skilled fighter and use essence magic. Is there anything else? Lark took a deep breath. You take an oath. While blood flows through my veins, no innocent shall ever suffer pain. It means I will give my life to defend people from the Conclave. He tapped the hilt of his sword. We even spilled drops of our own blood in the Great Hall to seal the oath. Angel sat back in surprise. A vow like that was not something to be taken lightly. It was yet another thing she found fascinating about this mysterious man. Lark continued. What about you? What kind of people were your parents, if you don't mind my asking? Angel shrugged. I never knew. They died when I was a baby, so I grew up in an orphanage and was never given a family name. I'm so sorry. It must have been awful, Lark winced. Why do you say that? Are orphanages awful where you come from? Angel asked. Unfortunately, yes. With the ongoing conflicts with the Conclave, we have a lot of orphans and not enough resources to take care of them, Lark explained with a resigned sigh. Well, it's very different on our world. We had wonderful medical care, comfortable clothes, loving surroundings, and amazing education, she said wistfully, as she got lost in the pleasant memories of her childhood. Your education must have been special, considering how well you turned out, Lark said gently, as he gazed at her. At his sudden tension, Angel shrank back in her seat. Why are you so curious about my background? He watched her nervously run her finger along the grooves of her pad repeatedly. Because I enjoy talking to you. I'm curious about who you are and what made you the person you are today, he answered and eagerly leaned forward. The brilliance of his red eyes transfixed her until she realized she had been silent, and he was still waiting for a response. Her heart fluttered at the sincerity of his voice. He looked so genuine, but that just made the alarm bells in her head ring louder. That's nice of you to say, but I have to go somewhere, she rambled as she bolted away for the doorway. Lark watched her run away, and again wondered if he had done something wrong, and tried to shake off the feeling as he pushed himself from the chair and finally resigned himself to settle in for the night. Yeah, the BGM was pretty thematic with that last exchange, wasn't it? It does make me think I should probably get around to pulling up either a playlist or a bit of a soundbar for different themes and different vibes. But the way I'm reading blind sometimes, it's hard to plan those ahead. So for now, we just have the consistent BGM. But that's probably something to think about for the future. Yeah, well. Not an hour later, Lark sat on the bed of his temporary quarters after an intense exercise routine and toweled the sweat from his neck. After spending days or even weeks at a time in the confines of his vessel, the ship felt spacious and comfortable. He still marveled at the simple devices at his fingertips. There was a food unit that kept leftovers fresh and could dispense basic rations, a small console used to contact other parts of the ship or browse information, and a fancy bathroom that he was embarrassingly still trying to figure out how to operate properly. Inexplicably, his thoughts turned once again to Angel and her strange behavior towards him. Normally, she was cold and standoffish, but when they started talking, she bloomed into a friendly woman who awed him with her intelligence. She was by far the most confusing person he had ever met, and yet the most fascinating. With a firm shake of his head, he reprimanded himself to ignore those thoughts. She was an alien woman, and as soon as they got to Sosaria, she would likely leave his life forever. This was not an appropriate situation for those kinds of curiosities. Instead, he needed to devote more time to her energy theories that plagued his mind. His head fell back and hit the soft pillow as he stared at the light blue ceiling. Despite everything that happened, fighting the ambush, the boisterous celebration and exercise, he wasn't tired at all. He rubbed his temples with his forefingers and tried to let his mind wander, as he often did when trying to get to sleep. Just as he felt his eyes grow heavy and started to doze, a thought suddenly struck him. His eyes flew open, and he shot out of the bed, and hurriedly pulled his tunic on in the dark before exiting into the hallway barefoot. Breaking into a run, his brain came into complete focus. He had to find Angel. When Angel returned to her room, she discarded her pad onto her desk. Too irritated to continue working on her research, she flopped onto her bed and closed her eyes. She wasn't ready to change into her nightgown yet, still too energized to sleep. She had never seen monsters before, let alone ones that had been people. As she remembered how Lark had valiantly taken on the Horde to save them, she felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. She didn't think she could ever be brave in that way. Although she was uncomfortable with how friendly he was with her, it also disquieted her how friendly she was back. After mulling it over, she decided that she would try to keep more space between them. It's not like she'd see him after they reached Sosaria anyway. Resolutely, she went to her dresser again to rummage through it for her pink nightgown. A sudden loud banging on her door caused her to leap in surprise with an indignant yelp. She threw her nightgown to the floor and wrenched the door open to see what the emergency was. Panic welled up in her chest at the thought that the communication system was down. Instead, she found Lark, standing there as though he had been summoned by her thoughts. Hey, I know it's late, but I have something important to talk to you about, he gasped, slightly out of breath, his black hair clinging to the sides of his face. I'm sorry, but someone else will have to help you. I need rest, and I will be intensely busy in the next couple of days. Only half of that was a lie. She was still trying to sort out her emotions, and the more distance between Lark and her, the better. She was unsure what she would be doing to occupy her time, but at least it sounded official. No, it's about your energy theories. I was thinking about what you said regarding my magic, and I think they might be compatible, he exclaimed with excitement. Despite how the idea piqued her curiosity, she was steadfast in her refusal. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath to steady herself. She wanted to stay calm, and she rebutted him once more. No, those theories are just that, theories. They don't matter right now, and I'm not interested in talking to you about them. Good night. She motioned down the hall to dismiss him once and for all. That doesn't sound like the woman I talked to the other day, he observed with a raised eyebrow. Look, I know something about me makes you uncomfortable, and I am sorry for that. However, this is more important than you or me, so if you refuse to talk to me, promise me you will talk to some of my people about it. She clenched her fists and felt her patience rapidly dissipating as she snarled. I said no, Lark! You have no right to intrude on my life like this! Lark faltered from shock, but then his own outrage flared. I'm not intruding on anything! If I'm right about this, it could be a huge breakthrough that could benefit both our worlds. Isn't this the kind of thing your people are here for? She seethed as her eyes burned holes into him. You barely understand who we are and what we are doing here. Gritting his teeth, he refused to back down. This entire crew has risked their lives to explore space and search for things to help your people. If you let your personal issues get in the way of something that can possibly do that, then you are dishonoring everyone on this ship, and you should have stayed home. Angel sputtered as she felt tears well up in her eyes. His words cut deep, but they didn't stop her fury, and with a cry of anger she slammed the door in his face. She heard his heavy footsteps fading down the hallway toward his room, and knew he was finally gone. She climbed into bed and squeezed her pillow tight as she broke down sobbing. She was angry that he didn't first leave when she had told him, enraged that he had drawn her from her shell with his kindness. But most of all, deep down, she was scared he might be right, and that she should have stayed on Soledad. The next morning, Angel was staring at the digital readout for the engine. There was a small error that was leeching off excess energy and dropping efficiency, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't bring herself to give it the focus necessary to solve the problem. With a growl of frustration, she gripped the readout with both hands and moved her head so there were mere centimeters between her eyes and the screen, forcing herself to read each piece of information carefully. She finally found the problem and corrected the error. She leaned back with a deep, exasperated breath, mentally chastising herself for missing such a simple problem and letting herself be distracted by what happened the previous night. Angel? Travik touched her shoulder gently, causing her to nearly jump out of her chair. She had been so caught up in her thoughts, she hadn't heard him approach. Sir, sorry, she stammered and stood straight, almost knocking her pad off the console. Travik furrowed his brow, noticing the redness in her tired eyes. Are you all right? He asked delicately. Angel lowered her head and mumbled, "Just had trouble sleeping last night. Nothing important." Dravik knew not to ask further, and accepted her answer. "I got word from the captain that you won't be needed anymore with our guest." Angel's heart leaped into her throat as she panicked about what Lark might have told Akron. Did he say anything was wrong? She tried to ask casually. The older man shrugged. "Not that I could tell. He just said he was done asking questions. So, unless you're needed on the bridge, you're back to working your exciting job here," he explained with a dry chuckle. As soon as Dravik returned to his work, Angel slumped in her chair. She scanned through her energy theories on her pad and bit her bottom lip. Although she was relieved that Lark had kept their argument to himself, she wondered why he didn't say anything to Akron about his idea that he was so fixated on. Resigned that she would never know the answer, she returned to her work. Lauren knocked loudly on Lark's door and hummed as she waited patiently. Slowly, the door opened, and an exhausted occupant greeted her. "Did I wake you? It's past lunch," she queried, as she confirmed the time on her pad. "I didn't get much sleep last night, and thought I would get some rest until we got to Sosaria," he yawned. "Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but if you had some time, I was curious if you wanted to have a drink together and chat." She held up another bottle of champagne. He blinked, and then his expression turned to one of amusement. "I thought Tarn said you were done with drinking for now." She shrugged casually. "Yes, but that was yesterday, and he wasn't in the mess hall just now when I pilfered this. Come on, my shift isn't for a few hours, and I hate drinking alone. You can tell me more about your world." Lark hesitated for a second, unsure of what to say, before he motioned for her to enter. She blew past him, sat at the console, and poured the glasses. "My wife might be concerned about me having a drink alone with a man I barely know, but considering you've done so much for us, I think she would make an exception," she contemplated, sipping her champagne. Lark didn't feel up to drinking or hosting guests, but he wanted to be polite. "What is she like, if it's okay for me to ask?" he inquired and swirled his glass. His long legs stretched before him as he sat on the edge of his bed. "Sarah? Oh, she's one of a kind," Lauren said dreamily. "We met years ago at the Institute. She was a sweet thing who wanted to help everyone, and some bullies in our class tried to take advantage of her, so I made them regret living, and afterward was her unofficial bodyguard for a while. Things just went naturally from there." She recalled, "What about you? Anyone special?" Lark shook his head. "I'm away for weeks or even months at a time, and there isn't much opportunity for relationships or love." "Well, maybe someday you can find a way to settle down. You seem like a nice enough guy." Lauren finished her drink and began to pour another. "I've been meaning to ask, why did that Adura prick call you Defiler?" He gave a wry grin and replied, "It's their pet name for me. I spent years destroying their troops, thwarting their plans, and being a constant annoyance to them, no matter how much they tried to kill me. They honored me with a name they felt exemplified their resentment of me, and many others call me that as recognition of being the most hated enemy of the Conclave." "I love it," Lauren declared and raised her glass. Lark beamed and clinked their glasses together. What was his deal, anyway? Is everyone in the Conclave as creepy as he was? Lark let out a low grunt and his face clouded. All necromancers are callous, hateful, and power-hungry in one sense or another. Adura, though, he's a special kind of evil. He takes personal pleasure in making people suffer. If he can do it through deception or trickery, it's all the more fun for him. That, combined with his exceptional level of power, is why he has risen to be second in command to Darkos. His body went rigid at the name of the Conclave leader as though pained. His eyes seemed fixed on a point just outside his window, and Lauren could sense his discomfort. "You know, if you want to vent or talk about anything, I don't mind. I can't promise I'll be as attentive of a listener as Angel, but I'm happy to try," she offered. Lark sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "I don't think I'll be talking to her anymore. We sort of got into an argument last night, and I said things I shouldn't have. I think it's better if I just leave her alone." Lauren blinked in confusion. "That's odd. I've never seen her angry before. Then again, I don't see her expressing much at all, to be honest." She pushed herself from her seat and cracked her knuckles. "But I think I've had enough to drink for now. Let me know if you want to talk more, okay?" He stayed silent, and Lauren decided it was better not to wait for a response. She gathered the bottles and glasses before returning to the mess hall to drop them off. Lark lay back on his bed and closed his eyes again, silently calling for sleep to claim him as quickly as possible. He wanted nothing more than to be back home, so he could put the whole situation with Angel behind him. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 6. We are actually getting pretty close to time here, so I think we'll probably stop the reading here for now. But we can stay for a few more minutes and chat just about what we've just read and gone through. We'll probably pick this back up tomorrow. Author, I'm sorry, I really don't know what to call you. But our schedule generally is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We do 2 hours each night. You are more than welcome to join us whenever you're able to. I'll usually go just boom, boom, boom through each book until we finish the book. We're about just a little bit less than 20% through tonight. And so this will be probably about a 5, maybe 6 episode series to get through the book. I for one am enjoying it greatly so far. It's a nice mix of fictions that like your references and your unusual your references and your inspirations shine through, but you've sort of turned your own ways into seeing your own flavor of this, and the blending of the fantasy and the sci-fi is interesting, definitely. Yes, Ian. When we started with Hemingway, it would have been beyond shocking to see him in the chat. But knowing Hemingway, there's no way he'd be sober long enough to type. So there's that. But yeah, it was wonderful having you here tonight to sort of partake in the reading of your book, and I very much look forward to you joining us as we continue through the next few days. And I'm excited for tomorrow. So, if anyone has any questions while the author is still here, please feel free to chime in. The author's link tree is in the description for the stream and the video. Please feel free to check them out. That's where I found the link to the web fronts to the storefronts where I bought the book. The Kobo the Kobo link is DRM free, so I do recommend it, but I won't pressure anyone too far. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. So do be sure, follow the author on Bluesky. I don't know if they had a Twitter, but I think most of us around here are more on the Bluesky train anyway. Let's just keep things all nice and friendly on that front. Hey, great, thank you so much, Zian. I'm very happy to see this sort of branching out. As I mentioned in some of my own posts earlier, we love supporting indie authors, authors in general. The whole point of this channel is to expose and enjoy good literature together. And if we expand out and provide the joy of reading and the time that we've spent together enjoying this literature to more people, all the better. And involving authors together and expanding into the indie space is one of the best things we can do. So this is a great series. I'm very excited to continue this as we go on. But I won't keep you guys for too much longer tonight. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here, and we will resume tomorrow from Chapter 7 of Archblade, Legend of the Defiler. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening, everyone. See you tomorrow.